Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank my partners in the budget process, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Speaker Kyle Hasty, and I also want to tell them I'm looking forward to this. We've done this a number of times, and I believe that we are laser focused on delivering for the people of the great state of New York, and so looking forward to the journey over the next few months. I want to thank my extraordinary senior staff that is here today. They work tirelessly. There's never a rhythm that says there's a slow time in their lives, even as much as I promise it sometimes, but they work so hard. And I want to thank the leader of our team, Secretary Karen Persicilli-Keough. I want to thank our Budget Director, Blake Washington. You'll be hearing more from him. Our Counsel, Brian Mahana. Director of State Operations, Catherine Garcia. Acting Director of Policy, Jackie Bray. I also want to acknowledge our statewide officials, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, our State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, for their work here as well. Senate Majority Leader Michael Gianaris, welcome. New York Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, glad to see everyone here. Finance Chair Liz Kruger, Assembly Ways and Means Chair Gary Pretlow, and Senator Rob Ort representing the Senate minority, and Will Barkley representing the Assembly minority, and all my other partners in government. Yesterday and over the weekend, I spoke at a number of celebrations to honor the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I referenced a number of his speeches. And he said this: life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I answered that question 1 week ago today when I presented a comprehensive vision for New York. Now, the State of the State book outlined over 200 policies focused on building safe communities and helping hard-working New Yorkers get ahead. Because, as I said, your family is my fight. Today, I'm going to walk you through how we bring this vision to life with our fiscal year 2026 executive budget proposal. A budget is much more than numbers. It tells a story of who we are, what we value, and who we're fighting for. New York is a complex state. We have great wealth and great need. And our challenge is to foster an environment where success thrives while making those who feel left behind, they can still see a path forward. That's the balance we've worked hard to achieve throughout my entire 3 years as governor, working with the leaders here today, working with the legislature. During that time, let's talk about the story of New York's resurgence. We've been through some tough years together. But during this time, we've become financially stronger, surpassed our recovery targets. We accelerated growth in jobs and in the economy. We've reduced unemployment, increased the minimum wage, and tied it to inflation. We put shovels in the ground in historic infrastructure projects and accelerated the innovation jobs of the future with AI, semiconductors, quantum computing. And we've catalyzed housing production all across the state after years of stagnation. Our own Buffalo is now the hottest housing market in the nation. We made our communities on Long Island more resilient against hurricanes and severe storms. We battled wildfires in the Catskills, fought floods in the southern tier, managed snowstorms and tornadoes in western and central New York. And we've reduced crime, funded police at record levels. We've elevated our parks, our arts, our culture, and now our tourism is reaching record highs. And most importantly, we've achieved all this incredible progress without raising income taxes. But the truth is, many families do continue to struggle. Nationwide inflation, the rising costs at the grocery store, every month working New Yorkers having to face such difficult choices on how to stretch all their dollars. That's why this budget is laser focused on putting money back in New Yorkers' pockets. This will be a $252 billion budget, funded by revenue that is up nearly 8%. And importantly, we've maintained our reserves at historic highs of more than $21 billion. We're investing more in New Yorkers because we have more resources to do so, and we're doing it responsibly. I know many of you are watching the transition in Washington yesterday, looking at it rather anxiously. Let me be clear. Changes at the federal level will create new challenges for our state and for programs that New Yorkers care deeply about. It's already started. And if Republicans in power there cut critical funding streams for Medicaid, education, child care, utility assistance, and the list goes on, those who are hurt need to raise their voices and direct that anger at Washington and push their members of Congress to fight for them. Because New York and other states will simply not be able to shoulder these costs on our own. So I'm looking to our congressional delegation, particularly the Republicans, to prevent the cuts that will harm New Yorkers, their own constituents. And if they fail, they must be held accountable. But even with this cloud of uncertainty, I pledge New Yorkers this: I will do everything in my power to protect your interests. Our budget priorities reflect what New Yorkers expect: common sense solutions that make real people's lives just a little bit better. We're delivering 3 major forms of tax relief. First, I'm fighting for an historic middle-class tax cut, $1 billion of investment to bring rates to their lowest level in 70 years. This means real relief for 8.3 million New Yorkers. Second, I proposed a one-time $3 billion investment to provide immediate relief with inflation rebate checks, $300 for individuals, $500 for families. And third, we're tripling the child tax credit, an $825 million investment that will provide up to $1,000 for children under the age of 4. That credit will go up to $500 for school-age children in 2026. But our support for growing families doesn't stop with tax relief. I'll direct an additional $120 million to provide free lunch, free breakfast to every single student in the state of New York. We'll save families as much as $1,600 per child every year, while ensuring that no child, no student ever goes hungry. So when you add all this up, the tax credit for the little ones, your family's inflation refund, school breakfast and lunch, plus the middle-class tax cut, this puts nearly $5,000 back in the pockets of many New York families. That's how you answer Dr. King's question. That's how you make a difference. Now I want to turn to another cost that is absolutely crushing families' budgets, and that's child care. It can exceed over $21,000 per child annually, often more than the cost of their housing. Driving down the cost starts with expanding child care options for families. That's why I'm proposing $110 million to build new child care facilities, renovate existing ones. These investments are necessary now to create more capacity than we have now to get us closer to our ultimate goal: universal child care. And I look forward to working with the legislature, the business community, our civic leaders, to start laying the groundwork to make this a reality. To deal with rising costs, New Yorkers need another form of relief, and that's removing the state and local tax deduction cap. This cap was instituted the last time Republicans governed Washington in 2017. It's costing New Yorkers, and has been, over $12 billion a year in taxes, more they're having to send to the federal government. $72 billion out of New Yorkers' taxes, out of their pockets over the last 6 years. And despite a bipartisan bill that would have addressed that issue, Republicans in Congress, including 7 from New York, have refused to act. They're actually working against their own constituents to accept a watered-down proposal rather than full repeal of the cap. New Yorkers deserve better. As governor, I say this: full repeal or no deal. Let me repeat: full repeal or no deal. Let's talk about another major driver of affordability. Housing. For my generation, your generations perhaps, buying a home was a dream always within reach. But for today's young families, it's just a pipe dream. We need to change that reality. And this budget takes bold steps to do just that. We're making a $1 billion state commitment to make New York City's ambitious City of Yes a plan that's now reality because of our investment. That means 80,000 new homes over the next 15 years. Homes that wouldn't exist if the state didn't step up to help. We're also putting $100 million towards starter homes and down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. And we're taking a stand against predatory private equity firms by instituting a 70-day pause on their ability to bid on residential properties. Remember that big bag of carrots I showed you last year to give to those communities that would help us build more housing? Well, it turns out we're having even more carrots this year. We'll continue our pro-housing communities. The number keeps growing and growing. I'm so proud of this. We have our $650 million in discretionary funding, all pooled together to help these communities. But because there's such demand, we're going to add an additional $110 million. This is for the infrastructure projects, the planning expenses, the sewer that's necessary to help them grow. I know this coming out of local government. Because I've said before, the costs of housing and rent will never come down if we don't increase the supply. I'll say it 1,000 times. We have to build, 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 and build some more, and have the courage to do so. But it doesn't matter how many homes we build if New Yorkers don't feel safe where they live, where they work, and travel. From the moment I became governor, I made public safety my top priority. One of our main focuses has been New York City subways. We've launched teams of trained professionals to help those caught in the throes of mental illness. We deployed 1,000 National Guard, state police, MTA transit police, all to protect our critical infrastructure, our transit systems, and now we're giving NYPD even more support. Partnering with Mayor Eric Adams and the NYPD, we're placing officers on every overnight train from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And these patrols began last night. People saw them. But also, it's dark down there. How about more LED lighting to brighten it up? Additional platform barriers and modernized fare gates so we can collect the money that's now being evaded. And we'll commit an additional $45 million to our National Guard to ensure that their presence is visible. And also, we're going to strengthen our laws involving involuntary commitment. Our subways, as I've said, cannot be rolling homeless shelters. We must have the ability to help those who aren't able to seek help themselves, who are refusing help with the basics because they don't have the mental capacity to make those decisions. This is about showing humanity for fellow human beings who are suffering from mental illness that is literally putting their lives and perhaps the lives of others in danger. In addition to our focus on New York City, we're continuing our statewide approach to fighting crime. No governor in state history has invested more to eradicate the scourge of gun violence in our communities. And I'm proud that the data shows that our strategies are working. In 2024, we had the lowest statewide shooting rate on record, with murders outside of New York City at their lowest rate since 1965. Shootings down 28%. But we know our work isn't done. That's why this year we're committing a record $370 million for proven gun violence prevention programs, along with $50 million for upgraded law enforcement technology. I saw it in action in Buffalo when I was over there just a short time ago. It's making a difference. And also $13 million to establish new crime analysis and Joint Special Operation Command headquarters. Think about this. Nowhere else in the nation are they doing this. Bringing together over 100 local, state, and federal agencies to share data and coordinate in real time to prevent crimes as well as solve them. And we'll finally close those loopholes in our discovery laws that delay trials and lead to cases being thrown out for minor technicalities. And we're reaffirming that there's no place for hate in our state. With $35 million in grants at a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise. And we have vulnerable locations, yeshivas, synagogues, mosques. We must protect them, and this money will do just that. And we're putting more state troopers at the northern border, where we've seen a sharp uptick in fentanyl and weapon seizures. Because when it comes to protecting every single New Yorker, I'll use every tool at our disposal. Our fight for New York's future also means leading the way on climate action. This year's budget directs $1 billion, our largest climate investment ever, to accelerate New York's clean energy transition. These funds will support critical projects in clean energy generation, create good-paying jobs, and reduce energy costs for New York families. We also must be prepared to meet the challenge of the federal government, walking back commitments to offshore wind, a key energy source in our transition to renewables. Addressing these challenges now will help ensure a healthier world for our children in the future. But we cannot ignore the fact that our children have challenges already, today, right inside the classroom. The numbers tell a stark story. A recent poll revealed that over 72% of teachers, high school teachers across the nation, report that cell phones in the classroom are a major disruption for their students. And in fact, 95% of their students have access to a smartphone. And those kids are receiving, on average, 250 notifications a day throughout the school day. Now, as a mom, New York's mom governor, these aren't just statistics to me. I know how hard it is to get your kids' attention. My kids used to text each other under the kitchen table to each other, meaning they weren't talking to each other. It started back then. It's happening in our classrooms. We're not developing the skills we need because kids are distracted with the cell phones. And how hard it is for our teachers, trying to teach algebra and geography, and they're competing with viral dances and messages from their friends and sometimes threats, bullying. How do you pay attention to the subject at hand when this is going on? It didn't happen when we were younger. That's why last year I convened roundtables all across the state to discuss the impact of these cell phones on children's ability to learn how to interact eventually as adults, communication, but also I was worried about the effect on their mental health, and this was coming from the teenagers themselves telling me what was going on. The stress they're under was enormous. So we consulted parents, students, educators, administrators, advocates, local leaders, and we worked to devise a solution to this complicated challenge posed by smartphones in schools. As a result of these conversations, I'm announcing today a proposal that will transform our classrooms, return them to a place of learning, and that is a new statewide policy to make classrooms in the state of New York distraction-free so our children can focus on the things that matter, learning. By the start of the next school year, every student will be required to disconnect from their devices during the school hours, bell to bell. That means during class, at lunch, in the hallways. Our kids will finally be freed from the endless disruptions of social media and all the mental health pressures that come from it. Schools will have flexibility in how they implement this. Districts can decide how they want to store devices. Many are already doing it. And they can ensure compliance. And of course, there'll be exceptions for those students who need devices for medical reasons or to assist non-English language speakers or for students with learning disabilities. We'll accommodate all of them, of course we will. And the state will provide financial support for this transition. But every school must establish a policy to help these students finally thrive without the addiction to their cell phones during class times. That's just the first step, though. We need to give kids safe places to play again. Let them be kids again. Our new Unplug and Play initiative will steer young people to healthier pursuits and nurture minds and bodies. We'll fund 100 new playgrounds, create 100,000 out-of-school activities, and we're building on the incredible popularity of our last year $150 million investment in the New York Swims Initiative. We'll add another $50 million for more pools to be constructed, because I know they're making a difference, and provide free swim lessons to tens of thousands of New Yorkers. There are a number of other elements, very important elements of the budget I want to discuss. My budget director, Blake Washington, will go into more detail. But it's top line. First off, school funding. We're beginning the process of taking targeted steps to modernize the state's outdated foundation aid formula. We're replacing a 20-year-old poverty metrics data with current census data to more accurately determine student need. This will ensure that state dollars go to the students who need them the most. And let me be clear, I know any change is hard. And whether it's working or not, the status quo is always easier, right? That's why it's important to know that the vast majority of schools will receive more money than they would have, even without these adjustments to the formula. And I want to thank Bob Negna and the Rockefeller Institute for undertaking review and providing really thoughtful recommendations. Now let's talk about one of the largest spending drivers of our entire budget. That's Medicaid. Nearly half of all New Yorkers rely on publicly funded health insurance. The state share of Medicaid funding this year will be over $35 billion. Over the long term, we'll need to take action alongside the federal government to manage this growth, which is not sustainable for New York taxpayers on the current trajectory. We'll take smart steps to control costs while protecting services. And we've secured federal approval already for a new managed care assessment that'll generate $1.6 billion annually. And we're investing $1 billion in our safety net hospitals. We need them, and continue our innovative social care networks. We'll continue to ensure that every New Yorker has access to quality health care regardless of their zip code or their circumstances. There's also another essential service that must remain strong: our public transit network. 2 years ago, we faced a fiscal cliff at the MTA, and working with the legislature, we took action. We secured over $400 million in operating efficiencies, provided over $1.1 billion in annual funding, all of this to ensure that the lifeline for New York City's economy, and therefore the state's economy, remains affordable, efficient, and reliable. And we must ensure that the MTA has the capital funding required to keep the system running and to deliver new and expanded services that the commuters deserve. MTA is developing an updated capital plan to propose to the legislature and myself. Once we receive it, we'll determine the best way to fund it. And this obviously will be resolved before the end of session. And I'm confident we'll deliver a plan that advances critical projects, like extending the 2nd Avenue subway, connecting Queens and Brooklyn through the Interborough Express, new Metro North stations in the Bronx, and faster service in the Hudson Valley. Beyond public transit, we're also strengthening our broader infrastructure. Just over the last year, we improved over 3,100 bridges and enhanced more than 2,300 lane miles of highways. And now we're proposing an additional $1 billion for our DOT capital plan, bringing this to an historic $34.1 billion. We're advancing transformative projects all across the state, replacing the I-81 in Syracuse, similar opportunities, the Cross Bronx Expressway. Here in Albany, replacing the Livingston Avenue Bridge, reimagining the waterfront along the 787. Same in Buffalo, we've been working on the Kensington. We're making long overdue investments, also with our $1 billion Pave Our Potholes program, which I saw in every corner of Long Island, potholes that used to be causing damage to vehicles now finally being repaired. We need robust support for local infrastructure as well. Again, coming out of local government, I know the stress is on our towns and cities to have to come up with the necessary money, especially in our cold weather parts of the state, where the roads decay every year because of all the snow plows and the salt. We have to keep making these investments, and we will. So I've outlined some of our major top-line priorities for the next year, but there's much more to this budget that I believe will make a real difference in people's lives. That's what this is all about. At this time, I'd like to ask our Budget Director, Blake Washington, to give us an overview of the state's finances and walk us through some of the other important investments that we're making. Blake Washington.
So thank you, Governor. Thank you for the opportunity to serve the people of the state of New York. It's been a year and a half. It's been a lot of fun. So, and thank you to the legislative leaders, the controller for being here today, the partnership throughout the year. We appreciate it. Our colleagues, the commissioners that are here, and my colleagues in state government. Just thank you very much for being here. So we're going to go through some slides that keying in on some of the items that the governor has already spoke about, but we'll just jump right in. As the governor mentioned, let me get here we go, working the slides here. As the governor mentioned, we have a all-funds spending total in the executive budget of $252 billion, which is a 3.6% increase over last year. The all-funds budget includes things like the state operating dollars, federal funds, capital spending. If you look at just the raw state support, state operating funds, that's up 7.9% to $144 billion. Importantly, the executive budget does not include any income tax increases and includes several proposals to address affordability. Those proposals in total equate to $5 billion. We will return surplus revenues to state taxpayers throughout the state, 8.6 million of them through the inflation refund. We'll cut taxes for the middle class. This will be the second time that under the governor's leadership we've cut taxes for the middle class in 4 budget cycles. The taxes would, as a result of this action, be the lowest level in 67 years, and for a cumulative benefit of $2.7 billion. We'll enhance the child tax credit, and we'll also provide for free school meals. Now, to accomplish all this, the fiscal health of the state of New York must be in sound shape, and pleased to report that it is. Our economy is strong. Last year, the S&P was up over 23%, the NASDAQ 29%. And as all of you know, the state of New York has an outsized dependence on the performance of Wall Street. It's the #1 driver for revenue in the state of New York. So when they do well, the state of New York does well. Unemployment remains low at 4.3%. Personal income will continue to grow over the planned period, also impacting our receipts. High inflation rates that we saw during immediately following the pandemic have subsided. But as we know, the prices have not fallen commensurately. That kind of goes back to the $5 billion impact that the governor's budget provides. How do we get money back to the people to address those high costs that linger today? CPI is projected at 2.8%. And I'm not keeping up my slides. Here we are. Forgive me. Underemployment. We have, as everyone knows in this room, our economy was impacted disproportionately by the pandemic. Our jobs took a real dive in the midst of the pandemic, and it's taken us a while to rebuild. But as of spring 2024, state employment has returned to pre-pandemic levels, which is really great news. But even more so, we have 400,000 current jobs to open throughout the state. The state is open for business, so hopefully anybody that's out there hearing this address or knowing about it, the state of New York has a job for you in every corner of the state, upstate, downstate, and everywhere in between. The state's revenues are strong. This time last year, our view in the division of budget was less optimistic than it was today. We had some flagging receipts which improved over the negotiating period, and working with the legislature, we were able to restore some of the items that we had initially had in the executive budget just on performance of receipts alone, reflecting and adapting in real time to deliver last year's budget. Coming into this year's budget, since then we're about $6.5 billion over plan projections from last year. And coming into 26, we believe that will carry forward. We think that PIT, personal income tax, will drive the variance in 26 to the positive of about $4.7 billion. The state's fiscal health is sound. It's based on a few different measures that we follow tightly in the division of budget. Number one, the governor's initiative to provide for the state's highest level of reserves, $21.1 billion in reserves. Those remain at the historic levels. They're not touched under the 26 capital plan, financing plan. The state has a AA+ credit rating. We're coming into this year and to fund some of the initiatives that the governor's laid out. We have $5.3 billion in surplus revenue receipts in the current fiscal year alone. Under the governor's leadership, we've committed $13.6 billion in pay-go to avoid more costly debt. That's just over the last 4 years. We've paid $11 billion to further reduce debt payments in the out years. We now have the lowest debt to income ratio since the 1960s. We also, I should note that our cumulative out-year gaps remain manageable. As a result of this plan put before the people today, the out-year gaps are changed by approximately $4 billion across the plan period. So this budget does not inflate out-year gaps either. On the immediate horizon, there are several unknowns that could negatively impact the state's economy. Starts in Washington, D.C., where uncertainties abound for all of us. We're still learning. We're a day into a new administration, and I think that we all know there's going to be changes. Certainly, but as it relates to the economic position of the state of New York, tariffs and federal tax policy could impact inflation. Immigration policy looms large. Geopolitical shocks and changes in the international trade could result in supply chain disruptions. Changes in federal spending priorities, of course, are something that would have an outsized impact on the state of New York. And I think that you have to look no farther than some of the stuff that was in the public domain just last week, a list of potential revisions in spending for health and human services programs totaling $2.5 trillion over the Congress's planned period. So those things, when we look at those policy prescriptions in black and white, we know that those would be a real shock to the programs that New Yorkers hold so dear. So on to spending growth. The big items in this year's budget is a 14% growth in our Medicaid program and a 4.7% growth in school aid. In any year when dealing in the state of New York, those are always the two cost drivers in spending, and that carries through the current year's budget. The Medicaid number that you see before us is also influenced by an MCO assessment that we provided in last year's budget, where we will draw down a federal share to make targeted investments in the health infrastructure over the next 3 years. This chart before you here kind of just details again where Medicaid and school aid are. We'll get to those in a moment. But social services, the number here is elevated. You can see that's driven largely by the tremendous amount of child care investments we've done in just the last 3 years. We've more than doubled child care subsidies working with the legislature. In the mental hygiene, we've done historic investments to increase the number of beds in all sorts of care facilities, all sorts of levels of care facilities. But just diving into Medicaid for a moment, before we go into Medicaid, the governor alluded to this earlier, but we have to recognize that when we talk about Medicaid, we're talking about seniors and children, expecting moms, persons with disabilities, and everyone in between. 7 million persons in the state of New York, our friends and neighbors, are recipients of the Medicaid program. When you add the Essential Plan and Child Health Plus, you now are up around 9 million persons in the state of New York that avail themselves of publicly sponsored health insurance programs. We're very proud of that. We're very proud, the commissioners here, to know that we have a robust level of coverage between publicly sponsored plans and commercial plans. We have a deep penetration where the people of the state of New York, when they need care, they have accessible care at their fingertips. Having those many enrollees and that level of penetration does cost us $35.4 billion in the current year. It's a $4.3 billion year-over-year increase. Most of that increase is driven by stubbornly high enrollment post-pandemic. About 900,000 persons are on the Medicaid program that did not exist pre-pandemic. We also have strong growth in the managed long-term care program, enrollment growth. Pharmaceutical costs are elevated, but also included in that number is the impact of the MCO tax. Again, drawing down the federal share and reinvesting it in the state. We're sort of just on as a financial plan matter, you kind of count twice. So that sort of impacts that value. I'd say that the number here is large, and I think that, we're in the Division of Budget, certainly the senior team, we have a continuing dialogue, I think, on how to restrain health spending. It's one that will continue throughout the year in consultation with advocates and consumers, associations, and the providers. I think one of those discussions we've already begun with health associations is, what does the state of New York do? What do we ask of you to run a business that just makes it onerous? What costs you more money? What are regulations that could be changed that don't have an impact on patient care, doesn't have impact service delivery, but maybe makes your job easier on a day-to-day basis? Those are the questions we're asking for of the health associations. It's been a productive, they've been eager to advance these ideas, and we'll hear them out. But also, we shouldn't shy away from tough decisions, particularly when our singular goal is to preserve state resources for the consumers that need it most. Responsible stewardship in this space means that we shouldn't be committing resources to management organizations that are often shadowy, that would not exist but for the Medicaid program. State taxpayer dollars fueling bulk mail campaigns, print media campaigns, digital ads, all intended just to scare people and to mislead people. We don't need to pay for that with state taxpayer dollars. We don't need to use state taxpayer dollars to fund AstroTurf campaigns, planes over the Capitol building. None of that is necessary for the use of state taxpayer dollars. We should all be alarmed by that. Because every dollar that's spent in that sector and that side and on that nonsense is a dollar that's taken away from the people. So I think as we look into the Medicaid budget, we're always looking to sharpen our pencils. We're always looking to refocus and to get back to basics, make the common sense choices to sustain the program in the long run, but trim away the fat and the unnecessary nonsense as we move forward. As I alluded to, the MCO assessment will provide $1.6 billion in reinvestment over the plan period each year. We'll invest in our hospitals and nursing homes. We'll provide for expanded safety net transformation. We'll also offset some of that large year-to-year growth on state spending. Just last week, the governor, Friday, was at Jamaica Hospital announcing some of the investments that we started in this year's budget to transform Jamaica Hospital into the community hub that the people so desperately desire. We've also done something 6 months ago at Kaleida. There were other initiatives announced on Friday as well, which are in Glens Falls and in Montefiore, really wonderful wins for the communities. We want to keep building upon that. The MCO assessment helps us do just that. On education, as you're all aware, it makes up a sizable portion of our budget. We provide $37.4 billion in school aid, which is a $1.7 billion increase year over year. And in just 4 years under the governor's leadership, we fully funded foundation aid for the first time, and simultaneously increased school aid by $8.1 billion, and just inclusive of this budget, in just 4 years' time, a 28% increase, giving the resources to the districts to teach our leaders of tomorrow. As the governor alluded to before, we have updates to our foundation aid formula. We are going to replace the outdated census poverty data. We're going to change it with what we call a SAPE, S-A-I-P, S-A-I-P-E, a universally accepted variable for catching up to meeting the students where they are, more accurately assessing need. We have free and reduced price lunch data, which will be swapped out for economically disadvantaged data, a universally accepted metric, which counts your number of public assistance recipients, SNAP recipients, a more truer measure of what poverty might be in a school district. We drive additional aid under this plan to low-wealth school districts, and we guarantee each district in the state of New York will get at least a 2% annual increase. Home stretch on transportation, we have a $32.7 billion assumed in the executive budget for the MTA's capital plan. These data you've seen in prior iterations from the MTA itself. We have this budget calls for a $3 billion commitment from the state of New York, $3 billion from the city of New York. The MTA itself has offered that they can provide $12.3 billion in capital financing through the plan period. And based on federal shares as it exists today, about $14.5 billion from the federal government to fund the MTA. Of course, We will need to adopt a capital plan working in concert in tandem with the legislature and the MTA, and that's something that will warrant further discussions in the next handful of months. And as the governor alluded to as well, you know, just talking about the MTA in a vacuum, we want to make sure that the state of New York knows we're listening. Throughout the fall, we've heard from contractors and labor and all the persons that interface with our state's roadways. They've said, you know, there's a lot of stress on because of inflation and inability to take on new projects. We're sort of we're robbing money from the next capital plan, pulling it forward to pay for the stuff today. The governor's budget provides $800 million to just provide for those inflationary increases in the core program, which is a win to make sure that projects are delivered on time and in a cost-efficient manner, because the more you delay, the more costly these projects get. We have $100 million for CHIPS and touring routes, and $100 million for non-MTA transit systems. So I think that today, if you want to join me at 3 o'clock, we'll have a more detailed technical briefing going across the entire budget. And we're here, certainly as a division of budget, for all of you. If you have any questions or concerns, we have a wonderful team that's willing to work and willing to dig in and provide answers 24/7, 365. So I just want to say, as a recap, Governor, thank you very much for allowing me to serve in this role. I'm having fun, and believe it or not, and let's get on with it. So thank you.
That concludes our